O'Reilly. Are your wiper blades chattering, skipping, or squeaking? Don't let streaks or smearing on your windshield compromise your visibility. When it's time to replace your wiper blades, stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts and see our selection. Our professional parts people will even install your new wiper blades while you wait. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
You know what my favorite text is? A waypoint in the onX Hunt app to a goblin turkey. The list on the onX Hunt app features for chasing turkeys is long, but knowing exact public and private boundaries and land ownership details will help you find more places to hunt, whether that's on public or private. I'll be toting the Hunt app through the spring woods in a few states this year, and I recommend you do the same if you want more turkeys on your table. Also, onX has a special offer for you. Use code BEARGREASE to receive 20% off your membership at onxmaps.com/hunt this spring.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
My name is Clay Newcomb, and this is a production of the Bear Grease podcast called the Bear Grease Render, where we render down, dive deeper, and look behind the scenes of the actual Bear Grease podcast. Presented by FHF Gear, American-made, purpose-built hunting and fishing gear that's designed to be as rugged as the places we explore.
Speaking of big mustaches,
Yeah.
if you notice in this room,
there's one person without
somebody
one.
is missing a mustache, and I think we should do something about that.
Oh, what have
You
y'all
get to
done?
take your pick, Misty.
So, yeah, Misty. Misty is usually, and today, the only one in the room without a mustache.
It's true.
If it would make you feel better to
Not
have
if
them,
you would make you feel better. I
It would make
purchased
you feel
these
better?
months ago to make you feel welcome, and so you should feel
So there's
obligated.
the Fu Manchu, the Dolly, the Disco Brave, the con artist, Rollin' Roly, Rich Uncle Nickelbags.
Yeah.
Chew, give me nickel bags. I'm not sure that Fu Manchu. I don't think I have a long enough chin
Misty,
for that.
I think you'd look good in a number of those. So you get to
Well,
take your pick.
So this is a gift so that I,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been kind of grateful to not have a mustache. I've got
Well-
some ancestors.
Welcome to the Bear Grease Render podcast. We have a very special guest today, for real, like a real special guest. But before we introduce him, I'm going to I got a few things I want to show you guys.
Oh.
Okay, while Misty's picking out her mustache. So Josh went to like a Dollar General or something, and
I ordered
Oh,
these on
This
a
looks much
Oh, wow.
fancier
on
than-
an online retailer, which we will not mention.
These are official.
okay, so Misty's putting on her stash, so she'll feel she'll feel good.
Misty, I feel like you've made an excellent choice here.
Okay, good.
Is it on straight?
Let me see.
Yeah, now, okay. This is going to be pure chaos.
Oh
now.
yeah, you look amazing. You've never looked better, Misty. As her husband,
This is approved for this setting.
as her husband, how do you feel about your wife's mustache?
It might be like a waxing deal, like the ladies do where they rip it off.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
So I've got a few things I'd like to share with you before I introduce our guest. Now, guest, you feel free to chime in at any time. If they hear your voice, they'll just wonder who you are. I was out on the phone today. Do you know much about arrowheads, Jeremy?
Little bit.
Stone points. I was I was out today talking on the phone, walking through the mule pasture, and anytime we get a big rain, I'm telling you, anytime we get a big rain, if you want to walk out there, you'll find flint points. I actually found 2, but this is a broken. It's half a point, and I really believe that was probably an actual arrowhead. Most of the points you find that are slightly bigger are addle or spear points. You look good. It's really hard to take you serious with that on. This is what I have is the haft and the 2 corner notches, but that's a really nice looking. Yeah. And man, I tell you what, when I saw this, do you know what I did? I picked it up and took it back to my office with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm kind of on a little bit of a tangent about people saying, don't pick up stone points. If you're on public land, you can't. It's a law, and that's 100%. Like, you can't pick it up. That's okay. If you're on private land,
you can or can't?
You cannot.
You cannot.
You cannot pick up artifacts or really anything off of on public land.
Right,
that's okay.
Right.
But I've had some kind of people say that you shouldn't pick up a stone point, and it just doesn't make any sense to me, because if this were the Folsom site,
right?
And if archaeologists hear that I'm finding stone points in my front yard and they want to come to my house and do a full excavation, come on, man, we'll make coffee, we'll have you on the podcast. Like, if y'all want to do an archaeological dig in my front yard, you're welcome to. I don't think that's going to happen, because there's about 30,000 other places that are more likely for this to happen. Are you with me?
I'm totally with you, and I don't see what would be the point of leaving? Well, no pun intended. What would be the point of leaving it there?
Well, so the only point, and I agree with this, is that by taking something out of, they call it in situ,
right,
when it's found, a point or artifact found just like it lays. There's a lot of value inside of that for archaeologists. If you mess around with it, then a lot of the story is lost.
But if that stone point is sitting on the surface and the next rain it's going to be in the creek.
Exactly.
What's the point of leaving it there?
Right. And the legality of it. Now, if I was on somebody else's land and I didn't have express permission to take a stone point, I wouldn't. And every stone point I've ever found on someone else's land, I have gone and asked them if I could keep it. And that is the truth. But anyway, I have quite the collection up here, Jeremy, of stone points. Most of them came from my front yard down here.
Do you feel like there's an inordinate number of stone points in that field right
there?
there?
I think there's a couple of factors right here that are important. There's a big year-round spring about 100 yards from right here where we sit. Yeah. There's also, it's the intersection of 2 creeks on a little low spot down here.
Right.
I think this valley had a fair bit of Native American camping activity. So just the fact that it's a valley probably means that it had maybe a little bit more than normal. But like the next valley over, I mean, there's nothing special about this one.
Your neighbor found a pretty good-sized stone point. Did he show you that?
Which one? Oh, yes, he did. Yeah, far away from here.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, not far away from here.
He found it at the place 2 miles away. Yeah, he didn't found it back in here. But no, I feel like the most respectful thing that I could do for the human that made that was to pick that up and ponder about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And show it to people.
Yeah. So I just, what do you think, Misty?
Well, I think
sometimes Misty thinks I pick fights just for no reason.
I mean, I just think I don't love that when he gets all snippy like that. Did y'all hear that in his tone of voice?
It's a soapbox.
And
everybody's entitled to have their soapbox.
Yeah, I think so.
He's got more than one. Everyone's entitled to have their, as in,
And anybody can start a podcast.
I did get on. Get on to my daughter the other day about being opinionated. And I felt like I had to eat my words.
We'll move on. We'll move on past. And I just want to say I deeply respect the archaeological community, and I do not intend to disturb any kind of major sites. But I mean, like, I put up stone points and people pick on me for picking it up, and I'm like,
let me just say this too.
Land.
I think one of the cool
things.
things.
Sorry, Jeremy. Our guest here has been thrust into.
I think one of the cool
debate.
things that Clay does with those points, though, I will just say this: since our kids were little, he would like show them to them, and he would tell them, and the last guy that. You're laughing because of my mustache. It's going to be difficult. Also, it itches. But he said he would always hold up the points to him and be like, the last guy that held this was, sharpening this for his dinner, and he'd make a little story for him about. And I feel like that always gave our kids some appreciation for the people who came before, and I think that's a value.
Yeah,
it makes you feel like a part of the whole story when you do that.
Because
it's a bizarre human experience to not get your food from the killing of an animal
Yeah.
with a stone point. For real. There's been, it's estimated that like 108 billion humans have ever lived on planet Earth. Okay. Right now, there's about 7.7 something billion people on Earth. So there have been about 100 billion people that are no longer alive that have been on the Earth. We've only been experimenting with this whole agriculture thing for about 10,000 years. For real, it could be argued, but it would be a legitimate statement to say the people who live in modern times are absolutely experimenting with the way humans should live.
Mm-hmm.
Most humans that have ever lived were killing their animals with stone points.
Great question. Follow up. Is the experiment working?
Oh,
Wow.
You have to
We'll
tune into Wild and Whole
We'll
for
have to
that.
ask our guests later. Yeah. Okay, so I hold in my hand a beautiful watercolor painting.
That's watercolor?
Watercolor.
I didn't know it was watercolor.
Well, I don't know what it is. Do you think I was there when she painted this? I mean, come on, man. Just go with it, okay? I hold in my
That's
hand
a beautiful watercolor.
a beautiful
Yeah.
watercolor painting of Warner Glenn
Uh-huh.
with the jaguar.
Who painted
So
it?
That's epic.
a well-known artist by the last name of DeMoss,
Okay.
and I purchased this online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so if you type in Warner Glenn jaguar painting, you can get a reprint of this, and I'm going to hang this up in the office.
Mm.
And so this image of this jaguar is the actual photo. I mean, that's what that's what Warner Glenn's photo looked like when he took the picture of the jaguar.
But he wasn't in the
But
book.
he wasn't. So the author took some liberty to put Warner Glenn coming up there with his white Walker dogs. But Jeremy, so we've interviewed and spent quite a bit of time with this old man named Warner Glenn. He's 86 years old. He lives in southeast Arizona, and he was the first person in modern times to document a live jaguar in the United States. So these jaguars.
Does Arkansas have a jaguar biologist?
If it was, it'd be Myron Means.
Yeah.
It would be. Yeah. Myron Means is our jaguar biologist.
Yeah.
He's my jaguar biologist.
Not my
And-
jaguar biologist.
So Warner has the original painting of this hanging in his house.
And it's huge.
It is huge. I mean, it's like 6 foot by probably 5 foot, maybe bigger, maybe 8. It's huge.
Wow.
But we were right in this country back in early March when we went to Warner Glenn's. We made a film. And I'll go ahead and tell you, there's going to be a film come out about Warner Glenn
Do you know
from
when?
Meat Eater. No, I really don't. But it's going to be incredible. He's 86 years old, Jeremy, and still rides a mule 2,500 miles a year. Just a bad to the bone, dry ground lion hunter.
Living
And
legend.
he really is a living legend, Warner Glenn. That being said, Kelly Glenn Kimbrough, his daughter, sent me an email yesterday, and Warner Glenn's oldest, best dog named Hook died,
Oh,
Oh,
passed away.
that's
Oh.
Hook was
man.
12 years old, so we hunted with Hook.
Yeah, he talked
And,
about him.
yeah.
Yeah.
He did. He did.
Yeah.
And Hook bayed a lion in a bluff on in early April. He bayed a lion in a bluff, and the lion jumped off a big cliff, and Hook, he didn't jump, but Hook went down after the lion. The only dog in the pack, as I understood it, that went down. The rock around that area is just incredible. I mean, you could get in a bind in a hurry.
Uh-huh.
And this lion went off, and Hook, 12 years old, went off with the lion and got down there and was baying the lion.
Oh, wow.
They ended up killing the lion. And then it took Hook 45 minutes of just scratching up the rock bluff to get back up. And then later, they had he was fine after that, but later he had some not complications for that, but they had to put him down.
Wow.
But anyway, old Hook. But I wanted to show
What a
y'all
way
that.
to go.
What
What
did
a way to
Warner,
go.
what did Warner Glenn say on the podcast? He said this might be his last.
Well, he said this might be Hook's last year and it might be mine, is what he said.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said me and
Oh.
old Hook might go out at the same time.
Mm.
So I don't think that's gonna happen though.
Mm.
Yeah, I wanted to show y'all that. And then look at this. Kolby
I've
made this
actually
for
seen
me.
that before.
Kolby made this for me. So this is a what is that? Watercolor? on leather.
It is paint on
Paint
I think
on leather.
buckskin.
Colby had
Some
this
sort of
made.
leather.
So you guys remember the podcast I did about whitetail secrets?
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about this big deer that I've been hunting for several years that we believe is dead. And we named him Jody. And I didn't tell why we named him Jody. There's a song by David Allan Coe called Jody Like a Melody. And the song, I wish we could sing it. I wish we could sing it.
We don't need to do it today, but we can sing that song.
Yeah, we can. But
Jody like a melody.
yeah, it's there's like, if you listen to the song with the thoughts of a white-tailed deer that just comes in and out of your life. Jody, like a melody you play inside my head. Till the thought of you is more than I can stand.
Yo, this is
Late
my
at night,
husband.
I lie awake and wait for you to come on my Tacticam. And when you don't, you know I almost lose my mind. Jody, like a melody, you warm me. So we named this deer Jody.
Yeah.
So Colby had
Came
this
in and out
made
like a
for me.
white buffalo, something of legend or myth.
Yeah. All right. Enough foolishness. We have a very distinguished guest with us today, Jeremy Wood from the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission.
Welcome.
Welcome, Jeremy.
Glad to be
I told you we were going to cut up a little bit before we got serious.
It's all good. Getting in the
AGFC.
mood.
Yeah. So Jeremy is the wild turkey biologist for the state of Arkansas, which is a big deal. So I just wanted to introduce him.
Do we get to question him later?
I've got
and ask
some
him
we're gonna
everything
grill
about
him.
his
This is the
entire
Where are
most.
all our
This is the most hated man in Arkansas.
life. What did you do with our turkeys?
He doesn't know he's walked into a trap. No. We all got great. I mean, I want to hear what you have to say. Before that, let me introduce all my guests.
Okay.
Misty Newcomb. Misty Mustache Newcomb. No, let's not do that.
No.
Great to have you, Misty.
Good to be
Hey,
here.
did y'all know that? Well, I don't know if I can say this or not. I'm going to be on the live podcast in the Live Meat Eater podcast. It's next week in Bozeman, Montana, and I'm going to have a special guest with me on the live podcast. I won't say who, but anyway, that's going to be a big deal.
That was the worst foreshadowing ever.
To Misty's left, Josh Lambridge, Spillmaker. Great to see you, Josh.
And if that special guest can't go, I'd be happy to go with you.
Okay. All right. Good to see you, Josh.
Thanks. Good to be here.
To your left, a guest who's been on here before,
Sure.
but it's been a while.
It's been a while.
Colby Morehead. Good
Thank
to
you.
see you, man.
Good to see you.
The Bear Tech.
It's good to be back.
So Colby, for anybody who wouldn't know Colby from my world, Colby runs Bear Hunting Magazine.
Facts.
Don't talk to me about Bear Hunting Magazine. Talk to Colby.
Yeah.
I spend most of my life directing people to Colby.
Yeah.
Bear Hunting Magazine, for those who wouldn't know much about it, Bear Hunting Magazine's been in print for 22 years.
Yes.
Wow.
Since 2000.
Yeah, since 2000. The only print bear hunting magazine in the world.
Facts.
Yep, just the facts. Just take it or leave it. And the magazine, describe the magazine. What do we have in there?
Well, it's just a beautiful collection of stories and information. That sounded kind of polished. No, it's just a collection of just people's stories. We take submissions. We have freelance writers, and they just there'll be tips and tactics and just stories, and you really never know what to expect except that it's going to be very well produced and laid out. And then we always try to tell the story visually as well, as just through the written word. So if you're someone that likes to just flip through a magazine, look at the pretty pictures, that's cool. If you want to dive in and just read it cover to cover, that's cool. If you're just into hounds and just want to read that content and look at everything else, it really is something that if you're interested in bear hunting or just like to know more about that, there's people that get it and never have intentions of bear hunting.
Yeah.
So it's just a good interface.
Anybody?
And I would say that as a subscriber, it is some fantastic tactile bathroom reading.
Good.
I don't think we want to know what that means.
You can put two and two together.
So I always tell people, if you want to get into any kind of bear hunting, so Bear Hunting Magazine, we've always tried to give the full gamut of North American bear hunting, which is interesting because a lot of times a species will be so isolated to one region. Like if you're hunting elk, you're pretty much going to be talking about the Rocky Mountain West. If you're, there's other species that are widespread, but the bear is the most widely distributed big game mammal other than the mountain lion in North America. Chew on that. Just chew on it. And then think about it. So
did not know that.
pre-European settlement, the most widely distributed mammal in North America, big game mammal, was the mountain lion. They were just almost coast to coast from Canada to Mexico.
That is
But
new information. for me.
Second was the black bear. So I say that to say we hunt black bear in the east in all these different methods. A lot of hounds, a lot of big woods, eastern deciduous forest, spot and stalk stuff, doing drives in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
But then you get into the west and you have this big spot and stalk type hunting. You also have hounds up in Canada in the boreal forest. It's so thick. Typically, it's you're hunting bears over bait. You can go to Alaska and have all kind of different hunting. Come to Arkansas, you can hunt them over bait, spot and stalk, whatever. There's a lot of different ways to do it. So the magazine tries to reflect that. That's all I wanted to say. But Kolby, so what we're trying to do, there's a thing that Robbie
Origins.
Kroger at
Blood Origins.
Yeah, at Blood Origins. Tell us about what he's doing.
Yeah, so there's a project. He's wanting to help support the Arkansas fishing game, especially specifically inside of the black bear research. And so they're looking to expand and really seeing how that's going to affect things. They're just wanting to learn more about the population of black bears.
And it's particularly with the southeastern United States where they southeast Arkansas, where the Gulf coastal plain of Arkansas, which is like the southern 1/3, where they are now opening up a season.
Yeah, furthering out the previous drawn zones. And anyways, they're starting a fundraiser. They're trying to raise $70,000 to give to this project, and so they're having people open up their own fundraising and help commit to trying to reach that goal. And so what we're going to do is Bear Hunting Magazine is going to start a fundraiser under Blood Origins that we're going to be giving away 2 different hunts to people. One is going to go to the top donor. They're going to be able to pick between the 2 hunts. And then we're also, anyone who donates even a dollar or whatever the minimum would be, will be thrown into a hat to get the remaining hunt. And so one hunt is going to be a coon hunt in Arkansas, and the other hunt is going to be a hog hunt in East Texas. And that hunt's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be riding around side-by-sides with thermals and doing some night hunting. Could do some day hunting too. But to just get into just some fun, different activities that won't get in the way of your personal hunting season. So we're going to be very flexible on dates, and we'll be around. We're going to be really going around your schedule.
Yeah.
Inside.
And so, are you going to tell who the coon hunt's with?
The coon hunt is with Mr. Velvety Smooth Voice, Brent Reeves.
Oh.
Yeah.
That needed a drum roll.
Yeah.
And then
And Waylon.
and
Yeah,
Waylon.
Waylon.
Yeah, and I'll be at that hunt, and so will the David McDaniels. He's East Texas Camo on Instagram. He's going to be hosting the hunt with, I think it's Foul Bore Outfitters in East Texas.
So basically, what he's saying is that you go to the Blood Origins website and you click on the Black Bear Fund, Arkansas Black Bear Fund, and you'll go in there and you'll see a bunch of teams.
Yeah.
And you basically pick which team you want to donate money to. And so Kolby's saying
Bear Hunting Magazine.
Bear Hunting Magazine, the highest donor. So you could give $10 or $100 or $1,000, or if you were Elon Musk and maybe
$44 billion.
$1 billion.
Yeah.
You could buy. I'm going to make an offer to Elon Musk right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Meat Eater and me will sell him the Bear Grease podcast for $1 billion.
I'm
going to even just go above my pay grade.
Yeah.
I'm
not sure you're authorized to cut this.
I know
deal.
I'm not, but I think they would be okay with this.
Yeah.
So okay, back on track here. So the
Does
person
it have to be Elon Musk?
that's
No.
only for Elon Musk.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no one else with $1 billion
Nope.
could step in.
No.
Okay. Well,
Just think of what they would do with it. It could be anything. I'd trust Elon.
Yeah.
So the person that donates the most gets to pick whether they go on a hog hunt
Yes.
or a coon hunt with Brent Reeves.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the second person just entered into or anybody is entered into a draw. Really, they're raising $70,000, which is a pretty noble cause to give to the Game and Fish to buy tracking collars to study Arkansas black bears, understand what's going on. Big deal.
Yeah.
I love it. That's pretty
It's a
cool.
huge deal.
Hats off to them for working hard for that. Hey, before we go much further, I want to talk about the last Bear Grease podcast. So it was quite different than anything we've ever done. We've never had just a compilation of stories. I think we had 8 turkey stories on there. And I've really enjoyed gathering the stories. I mean, it was fun talking to all those guys.
They were great stories.
Yeah. So all of you, most of you, listen to the podcast. Josh, what was your favorite one?
Okay, so I have a favorite story and a favorite part of a story.
Okay,
that's disconnected.
Fair. That's fair.
My favorite story was Giannis's story.
Really?
Yeah, because I love that idea of his wife. First of all, I love it when a dad takes care of his kids so his wife can go do something. That's an honorable thing.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting that Giannis' wife was gone for like 9 hours, and he was just like, "I want to go to bed. She'll be fine." It's fine. But I love the fact that she got so excited about it, and she was able to detail to him where the turkey was, and then him go in and kill it. What a cool thing! I mean, that's a great story of partnership. But I
hold on before you go to that one. Can I comment on Giannis' story?
Yes. Yeah.
I had somebody go, "Man, what a chauvinistic move to go kill your wife's turkey." He never made any mention of that, but apparently, they had some agreement or something that, he was the one that was going to get the hunt the next morning. And since that was recorded, since that was recorded, Giannis and his wife went out on their annual turkey hunt, and they both killed turkeys.
Oh, that's awesome!
Like last week. So, I thought that was a good one. Okay.
Yeah. And then
the favorite part of another turkey story.
Now, the favorite part of the other turkey story was Andy Brown telling that story about the guy with the turkey on the other side of the log. Yeah. And my favorite part of it is when he said, "And I just reached up under the log." What a redneck term. Reached. I reached up underneath it. I love it. That was awesome.
Doc Ryburn. Yeah, I could tell when he started telling that story that he didn't tell me what it was about. He said, "I got one more I'd like to tell you." And he had spoken in his normal voice the whole time. And he said, "There was an old boy," and he kind of dove into kind of this character, and started telling that story.
I reached
up under that log. That reminded me of there's a term, it's used in the Ozarks, probably used in the Appalachians too, where words are sometimes like the plural of the word was warped, like Ori Province. When I interviewed Ori Province, this old mountain man out here, he said he clumb a tree.
Clumb, yeah. The past tense, like reached is past tense of reach.
Yeah, past tense, not plural. Past tense.
Yeah, they're applying standard English rules to words that we don't.
Okay, is that what they're doing?
Yeah. That's what they're. Because think about it.
Reach, retch,
drag.
Climb. What did Ori Province say? I clumb. I
clumb the tree. Yeah. Anyway, that was I like that story. Doc Ryburn down in Louisiana.
That was a good story.
One.
Maybe actually they're applying irregular applications.
Misty,
that brings up something I've been wanting to talk about, and we're not, because we're going to go right to Kolby. But Jerry Clower, we did an episode on Jerry Clower, and they constantly use the word for that,
which our daughter
they would say
until she was like 7. I mean, she was pretty old, and she innately did that.
They would say, rather than saying, "We're going to take the car that we used to drive on Sunday, but we're not," but they'd say, "We're going to take the car what we used to drive on Sunday, but now we don't anymore." That constantly he used the word "what," where we would say that. Okay, Kolby. Moving right along. Favorite turkey story
all
of
that
those
language
8.
sounds normal to me.
Kolby's like, what are we talking about?
What are we talking about? Man, I like the general theme is it always involved someone else, and there was a lot of perseverance inside. I thought that was really cool. But my hat tip would probably go to Mr. Will. Just I could put myself in that story of just I I could visualize that whole thing. It was like I was just there with him inside of it. And
Was it the way he told it?
it was the way he told it. It was the relationship he had with the landowner. And then it was also like overcoming, like, man, nobody's been able to get this one for years. And he's just going there and he's like, I wonder if he just wasn't thinking, what have I gotten myself into? They done named this bird and I can't get to him. And and so he's like, man, I'm going to have to work hard. What do I do? you know, and then just overcoming an obstacle and just, I just like the whole kind of climatic way that he told that story.
Good story.
Yeah.
And, of all the turkeys Will's killed, which he's killed hundreds probably.
Yeah. And you could just hear his humility inside of it. I thought that was cool too.
Yeah.
He seems like a really humble guy.
Cool. Jeremy, what was your favorite story?
So I've got two, but it both basically kind of boils down to one point. I was listening to one of yours and one of Steve's, talking about taking the kids out hunting and thinking about, how literal, kids take a lot of things. So I don't remember if it's your daughter or niece that,
Mallory, his daughter.
that, taking out and like, don't open your eyes. And like, did you see it? No. It's like I heard all of this unfolding, but I was just like, I couldn't do it. Yeah. And then Steve's, thinking about his daughter and like, shooting in the head and I can't see the head and he's telling me to shoot. Well,
and I can't talk.
And I can't talk. So I got to shoot here. And so I was like, just trying to like, just soak all that in, thinking, 6-7 years down the line or more, whenever we feel comfortable enough with our own son to be like, okay, maybe we can try to get out here and try to take one. Like, okay, how do you learn from those kind of mistakes?
Keep your eyes open. You can take literal cues from those stories of what not to walk him through. Yeah. Well, and then Andy Brown talked about his son Scott, who didn't shoot a walking turkey.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yep.
And that was the exact. I hadn't even put all those three together, but those three stories.
Oh yeah.
From Steve's story of his daughter shooting a turkey when she didn't have a good shot because he had told her not to talk, so she couldn't tell him that she shouldn't shoot, but he said shoot, so she's just like okay, boom, and then to Mallory closing her eyes when we told her, turkey, you'll see the whites of your eyes. So she's like, it will solve that problem. Closed her eyes. Turkeys come strutting in. And then to Andy Brown telling Scott, don't shoot at a walking turkey. And so this turkey just just walks right in front. Anyway, go ahead, Jeremy. I'd never connected those three. That's good.
Yeah, but no, that was really it. Just like taking those lessons, to heart and like just thinking about them. They're all fun stories to listen to, obviously. And then, but yeah, just taking that into my own personal, just bank. Like, okay, how do I word this, down the line when I'm trying to go through those same lessons? Be like, okay, you need to shoot it in the head, but don't just focus like, just make sure you focus and you shoot it on the head. But don't, if I tell you to shoot, tell me if you can't shoot or something like that.
Misty, what's the developmental thing that's going on there with kids when they take you
concrete.
Literally?
They're concrete thinkers. They haven't developed abstract thought yet.
So if you say, don't shoot a turkey walking, your dad really doesn't mean that entirely. He just means if you have a choice and the turkey's like,
they're taking it concretely. They're not picturing, like they're just applying literal concrete rules to this.
And that's pretty much the way a kid should take what their parents say during that period of their life.
Yes.
Do exactly what I say. Don't take any liberty of yourself to think on your own. Sort of. Okay. My favorite story, I think, and all of them had a lot of unique dynamics.
It's hard,
but I liked Mo's story.
Oh yeah,
and
it's true.
When I just petitioned these guys to tell me their favorite turkey story, in my mind, a turkey story was good because of some dynamic hunting component or something like really exciting that was said, or exciting that happened, like a turkey did something really wild. It was interesting for me to hear all the reasons why, because I didn't try to coach him of like why something would be good or bad. And Giannis and Steve both said, hey, our stories are like, they kind of were like, I hope this is what you're looking for. And I was like, no, you get to decide what your favorite turkey hunt story is. And so it was interesting for Giannis because he's killed a lot of turkeys and had a lot of really exciting hunts. And he tells this one story about his wife, And then Steve has killed a lot of turkeys, had a lot of exciting turkey hunts. And he tells a story about his daughter. I thought Mo's was interesting I liked that his dad woke him up, and this is when Mo was an adult.
Mm-hmm.
His dad woke him up and said, "You might as well go." And that was a theme. I know from talking to Mo that was the theme of his dad always used to say, "Can't kill him when you're on the couch." Like that was just go. Just go.
Yeah.
And that's a good, if you want to be a successful hunter, you just got to go.
Yeah.
You can't wait for conditions to always be right.
I like how
usually
his dad,
they're not.
His dad said, "Well, you thought you heard one. That's better than all the ones you didn't hear."
Yeah. And it basically 2 mornings, exact same scenario. Very unlikely. I mean, killing a bird and pouring down rain off the roost, I mean, I would say is a highly unlikely scenario.
Yeah.
2 mornings in a row, same spot, same story. I mean, that would never line up. That would line up once in a lifetime for something like that to happen. I just thought it was pretty cool.
One of my favorite quotes from one of the stories was Will Primos when he said, "It may not have worked any other day, but it worked that day."
Yeah.
Exactly. That was good. That was good.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. I don't know if you stopped in at an O'Reilly lately, but I use one because we have one right not too far from my house. People there are super helpful. I don't care if I'm getting boat batteries, car parts, whatever. Love those guys. They got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you don't have to worry if you're in a jam. The team at O'Reilly Auto Parts can test your battery for free, in or out of your car. If it needs to be replaced, they'll help you find just the right battery for your vehicle. If you need your windshield wipers replaced, a brake light fixed, quick service, they'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. Whether you are a car aficionado or an auto novice, you will find the employees at O'Reilly Auto Parts to be knowledgeable, helpful, and best of all, friendly. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things do-it-yourself auto. You can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/meat-eater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/meat-eater.
Whitetail Institute launched the food plot revolution in 1988 with a concentration on research and real-world testing of forage products specifically for white-tailed deer. Whitetail Institute's research and development team of agronomy experts provide effective, personalized service. I've been using Imperial whitetail clover for a long time in a food plot back behind my house. In 2007, I killed the biggest buck of my life over an Imperial whitetail clover small quarter-acre food plot. Imperial whitetail clover is the only clover scientifically developed through years of selective breeding. Clover Extreme genetic stability provides extreme cold tolerance, disease, and drought tolerance. It really does. Clover is coated with Whitetail Institute's Rain Bond, a polymer coating added for enhanced seedling survivability. They have an exclusive offer for Bear Grease listeners, 15% off Imperial Clover when you use the code BEAR at whitetailinstitute.com. That's whitetailinstitute.com and use code BEAR for 15% off. Ready to win Mother's Day and cement your reputation as the best gift giver in the family? Give the moms in your life an Aura digital picture frame preloaded with decades of family photos. She'll love looking back on these memories and seeing what you're up to today. Even better, with unlimited storage and an easy-to-use app, you can keep updating mom's frame with new photos, so it's the gift that keeps on giving. And this is not a joke. Juju Newcomb has an Aura frame, and we share photos, and they're incredible. Also, my mother-in-law has one. We have them. They truly are really good, really high quality. The Aura frame is easy to set up. It takes just 2 minutes to set up a frame using the Aura app. It also adjusts the display depending on light levels in the room to maintain the true color of your photos. For real, the digital screen is amazing. Right now, Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. Listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $30 off plus free shipping on their best-selling frame when you use code BEAR, B-E-A-R, BEAR. That's auraframes.com. Use code BEAR at checkout to save. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, I hold in my right hand here the 2022 Arkansas Turkey Hunting Guidebook. And so we're going to talk. We're going to talk here to Mr. Jeremy.
We're going to see if you have this memorized.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just open up to page 47.
I once knew a guy. This is a true story. I once knew a guy, and I can't say his name. He's still alive. I mean, he's not even that old. And he once handed us a book, me and my dad, about ornithology.
What?
Ornithology. Birds, study of birds.
Okay.
And he said, he just handed it to us. He was trying to show us that he knew a lot. And he said, pick out any page on there and ask me any question. And Dad, I was standing there. Dad just picks it up, opens it up, and says, all right, page 133. You know, the speckled belly winged ptarmigan. And he read verbatim like what it said about that.
Really?
The guy just like a freak genius. And he said, I've memorized that book.
Well,
And he had. He at least convinced us, unless it was a
That's
magician.
impressive.
Unless he had it rigged where you opened it up and your finger went to like the same spot. Long story. Okay, so Jeremy, back to Jeremy. Man, you're not from Arkansas.
No, no.
But tell me a little bit about your career in wildlife biology. Like, where have you been and how did you get here?
Okay, yeah. So I mean, yeah, transplant, not from Arkansas, from Massachusetts originally.
Okay.
Went to University of Maine for my undergraduate degree in wildlife ecology and trying to figure out what I wanted to do in this world. You know, I hadn't figured my place by the time I finished my undergraduate degree, so I jumped around the country. I lived in Wyoming, Louisiana, Florida, you know, working with different state agencies, different federal agencies, universities, really trying to figure out my place in the world, and got into working with wild turkeys under Mike Chamberlain there at University of Georgia.
Oh, wow.
Early on, one of his grad students took a chance on me. I hadn't had any experience with game birds to that point, and you know, I basically got hooked at that point with turkeys and did that position, jumped the next year, worked with another graduate student before I ended up getting my own graduate project under Mike back in 2014. So I did that for a few years, graduated with my master's from the University of Georgia, and then moved down to Florida, got with their turkey program. I was their assistant wild turkey program coordinator for about a year when this opportunity came up here in Arkansas, and I took a chance, and the agency took a chance on me.
For sure, man. So what year did you become the wild turkey biologist here?
Here, late summer 2018.
2018.
So it's my fourth turkey season here in Arkansas.
Right on.
What were you
Just out of curiosity, when you were in Massachusetts, what got you interested in wildlife?
It was, you know, honestly, I grew up fishing. My grandfather hunted his whole life. I shot a little bit when I was growing up with him, never got into hunting. And I went to undergraduate thinking, you know, I'm going to go on the wildlife side of things. You know, I like to fish too much. I'm not gonna do that, you know, and go for a fisheries degree or anything like that. I'm gonna go for wildlife because fishing's what I love to do. I don't want to ruin that by going to work in wildlife. And next thing you know, I got into hunting outside of my undergraduate, you know, early 20s. Once I graduated, I got into hunting, and it's, you know, been a love affair basically ever since.
What was your thesis on with Mike?
So with Mike, I looked at the reproductive ecology of female wild turkeys. So looking at nesting, brood rear in relation to small scale prescribed fires during the nesting season. You know, obviously a lot
that's
of
exactly
concern.
what I wanted to
Subject
talk to you
matter
about.
expert.
So what'd you learn?
That honestly, you know, very few nests are actually lost to fire. You know, there's at least in that system where I was at in Southwest Georgia. I mean, they were managing it more for quail. So they're talking about a lot of smaller burns, frequent fires, and so they're burning on a 2 to 3 year fire return interval, sometimes sooner, depending on the objectives and what they needed to do within that stand. But you're talking about acreages that may range from, you know, 50 acres to a couple hundred acres in size on a typical burn, and they may be doing 2-3 units a day if the conditions were right. We're working in longleaf pine savanna, so really open, kind of flat communities that, you know, you lit a match and you could get them to roll across that fairly quickly. But, you know, in general, most of the stands of those birds were targeting to nest, you know, were about a year or two post-fire, and they were still a year or more out from having another burn rolled through there. So, you know, we didn't lose a single nest in the study to fire.
When were they burning?
They were burning anywhere from January all the way up into June.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. give us a rundown of the Arkansas turkey situation, because so 2 podcasts ago, we talked with Mike Chamberlain, and we always hear how Arkansas is like the poster child for the southeast turkey decline. And so give us kind of a timeline of history of the Arkansas turkey population to the best of your knowledge, bringing it up till today.
Mm-hmm. So, from my understanding, basically, if we go back about 100 years or so, early 1900s, populations in the state were, hitting their about lowest points. By 1930, 1940s, they were estimated to be only about 7,000 wild turkeys left in the state.
Wow.
The Game and Fish Commission was created in around 1915, and, late teens, early 20s, they're already starting to think about, what they needed to do with wild turkeys, started setting seasons, adjusting bag limits, though they're still incredibly liberal to what you see today. But they also started considering restocking with captive raised wild turkeys, game farm birds. And they put those out for many years and wasn't really successful at all. Those birds didn't have the natural instincts, to actually survive in the wild. They weren't used to predators, anything like that. And it wasn't until rocket nets were really picked up in popularity and that technique was developed in the late 40s, early 50s that, catching wild birds and moving
Misty,
them.
That's when they would put out bait for turkeys. Big flock of turkeys would come in, and they had rocket-propelled nets that would shoot out and catch a whole flock of turkeys. And then they'd take those turkeys, transport them somewhere else. So that was in the 1940s.
Yep.
And so they were able, and they were bringing turkeys in from other states or just other places where we had turkeys.
Some other states, we had some birds coming in from places like Missouri. I think we did get some birds from Pennsylvania at points, both captive reared ones and actual wild stock birds. But the majority of the birds in the state actually came from Brandywine Islands, an island over, I think it's Mississippi County in the middle of the Mississippi River. Yeah. Really good turkey populations over there, and so they caught a lot of birds there and moved them to different kind of refuges around the state where they were stocked. Early on they let hunting still go and, realized that some of those situations wasn't working that well, so they got to the point where they started closing those areas for a period of years to allow those birds to naturally repopulate the area and expand. I think they were estimating that they'd expand somewhere 10 to 20 miles over several years and kind of fill those habitats at the time. And so most of that restocking was finished by the early to mid 90s, though there were still
so for 50 years they were restocking turkeys.
Yep. And the majority of those, they kind of focused in and around the national forest lands, large public lands, because, early on the idea was that, wild turkeys were, they needed thick forest, not necessarily thick forest, but large expanses of forest, because those are the areas that turkeys were left. All these places that were harder to exploit. They hadn't really been harassed to the point that they were extirpated from the area like they were in a lot of other areas where there was more people and there was easier access. So, those early efforts focused there first and then built upon it. And it wasn't until you started getting to the 70s and 80s, maybe the 90s, where they started looking at what they considered these more marginal habitats, where you had this more of a combination, interspersion of kind of open land and forested habitats, and realized that that's actually more of an ideal turkey habitat, and that's when populations really exploded.
The big forest, yeah.
Yep.
And so the Arkansas turkey populations by the late 70s and 80s just skyrocketed.
Yeah, they started to jump. I mean, I think there were some periods, even back in the 70s and 80s, that you saw these fluctuations where we had good numbers and then there were some bad years, following poor weather events, poor hatches. But in general, that trend was continuing to increase all through time. And we hit about the early 2000s, and that's when things peaked, the late 90s, early 2000s. We ended up, the highest harvest year we had was 2003. The state, we harvested just under 20,000 turkeys that year.
Okay.
And then there was...
We refer to that time period as the good old days.
Yes, that's what I hear often.
So 20,000 was our biggest number of birds taken.
Yes, just under that.
Now, that's always been an interesting number to me, because, like, Missouri, they might kill 50,000 turkeys. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, in recent years it's been a lot less, but I think at their peak, which was in and around that same time, they killed about 60,000 turkeys up there.
That's a lot. And I know you can't, it's not comparing apples to apples to compare two states. I mean, they had a lot of ag land, or maybe more ag land than us. I don't know. What about Mississippi? What would have been their peak harvest numbers?
I can't remember exactly what their peaks were, but I think typically you see nowadays that they estimate somewhere in the 25 to 30,000 range. So it was probably somewhat higher.
It was notably higher than Arkansas, though.
Yeah. And I can't remember what those figures were exactly, but it was probably 35, 40,000, something along those lines.
Would Oklahoma not have had more birds than us, even historically at our peak?
Oklahoma gets difficult because you start moving into Rio Grande wild turkeys, and the majority of the state, basically your southeastern corner of the state's where you have true easterns, and then they talk about this sort of hybrid zone between the two, but the majority of that kind of central and western portion of the state's Rio, so it starts getting a little different when it gets to that apples to oranges comparison to truly say what's going on. I honestly couldn't tell you what their harvests look like through time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me when we talk about the turkey situation here in Arkansas, because really it's 20 years isn't that long when you're looking at wildlife management and looking at like a broad scale of animal populations going up and down. And humans, including myself and Josh, are pretty finicky when it comes to turkey numbers. You can go from a 3-year period and people might think, oh man, there's no turkeys anymore, and 3 years before they were wearing them out,
right.
But so I can be clear on this, what you're describing is an enormous amount of effort to get 20,000 turkeys, which was still lower than what the surrounding states had. At our peak, we were still smaller.
Yeah.
And did the other states put forth the effort that we did?
It's hard as far as restocking them.
Yeah.
So
Did they
most
have rocket nets?
Yep. All these are. So this was happening across the country during this entire period. North to south, Louisiana to Wisconsin, east, to Maine and Florida. All those states were experiencing these same declines. In the early 1900s, and then through time, through the middle 1900s, really started ramping up that. Those efforts in restocking. I think Mississippi was one of those states that was fairly early in there where they considered things to be successful and kind of complete. We were right there, probably within a few years of what they would have assumed.
And so you can't really, like me comparing Arkansas to Missouri, it's really not fair. Yeah. Missouri might be bigger. I don't know. It just has different habitats. So that's not really relevant, but I just kind of was trying to get like a bigger picture of, because that was my understanding, is that Missouri's always killed a bunch more than us. Mississippi's always killed a bunch more than us.
What's interesting is, a lot of people look at those bordering states, but I very rarely hear folks look south of the border. They don't talk about Louisiana often. And, that's one of the things that I've tried to do since I got here was kind of take a look at that landscape context. What are we looking at here in Arkansas? Because, people talk about that 20,000 birds, and, there's some interesting things, in regards to what our regulations were like at that time to where we're at now that make it even harder to compare harvest to now to back then. But when you just look at the landscape context, most of Arkansas, or a larger proportion of Arkansas, looks a lot like Louisiana. And, they typically harvest, about 3,000 to 5,000 birds or so on average. Their estimates, between their game check and then their estimates, on hunter surveys, they're estimating right in that ballpark. So we're just a little bit above that, and then you move into Missouri, and obviously they're killing a ton of different birds. But Arkansas is this unique mix of these different regional landscapes all coming together.
Lowlands.
Yep.
Essentially.
Yeah, you got the Ozarks on the kind of the northern quarter of the state. You move in down south below the river valley, that's a whole unique area. Then you get into the Ouachita Mountains. Below that, you got that large portion of the states, the Gulf Coastal Plain, primarily pine, managed timber. And then you move over in the, entire eastern, about quarter to third of the states, this really developed agricultural land, bottomland, in and around all these major river corridors. So, really the only remaining habitat out there is these bottomland tracts along the White, the Cache River, the Mississippi River, Crowley's Ridge, that formation. But outside of that, it's essentially non-habitat. So, that really restricts the amount of available habitat for wild turkeys in the state.
The eastern third of the state, at least, is like pretty limited turkey habitat. What he's saying is just along the rivers and stuff. There's places for them. Okay, I wanna ask you I want to ask you about three things. I want to talk about burning big national forests and specifically the timing of it. I want to talk to you about bag limits. And I want to talk to you about just kind of like your personal opinion of what's going on, because I think there's a lot. So I'm declaring that so all y'all can help me stay on track, okay?
Oh, we'll help you.
Yeah. Okay, so, man, I understand, like anybody that's paying attention to wild turkey management has heard this statement and can grab onto it pretty easily, is that burning helps turkeys more than it helps them. Yeah, maybe a fire would burn up a nest. It's possible. But turkeys can have another nest in the same spring. I'm just giving you the simple version. But what happens when you burn is that's one spring, and then the habitat is improved so much the next however many years that anything you lost during that one spring is gained so much more in previous years. Because, Misty Newcomb, everybody where I grew up, everybody, this week I heard it from a guy. He said, man, we used to have turkeys in the national forest, but we started burning all the timber in April, burning up the turkey nest. That actually sounds like his accent too. I didn't even want to get into it with him, but that was that guy. And then I heard another guy who I deeply respect, who has a wildlife biology degree, who gave a little rant the other day, and he said, I know all the benefits of burns. Like, you don't have to tell me about the benefits of burns and how it helps turkey habitat. But he says we're burning so late that we're inevitably burning up nests and inevitably putting birds in a vulnerable place by having them to lay eggs again and make a second clutch. And basically he was like, yeah, I've heard all that stuff about good habitat, but we're still burning up nests and really compromising the hen's ability to nest. Do you understand what I'm talking about, Misty?
I do. What I don't understand is why I'm the fall guy for the person who doesn't know much about turkeys in this particular podcast.
These guys are turkey experts.
I'm looking at Josh and I'm saying,
yeah, right. No, I just want to make sure you're following. So, do you understand what I'm saying? So, what's the truth, man?
So, I mean, no two fires are created equal. That's the reality. And a lot of people they look at the national forest and what's going on there, and you got to remember that that's only a tiny segment of this entire state. So the idea that we're burning up all the nests and that's what's causing population declines in this entire state, is probably a little bit nearsighted. I mean, there's 90% more of the state.
Let me stop you right there before you even get going, because that's a good point. It's like it's not just on national forests that turkeys are scrambling.
Yep, exactly.
So that's kind of your point. It's like, well, then it must not be the fire.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, there still is, obviously issues. Most of the research that's out there these days suggests that there is really minimal loss due to fire. It's not saying that there's not potentially loss happening, but, in the grand scheme of things, with all the other factors that are out there, it's relatively small fish. And most people, I put this out in a lot of the presentations that I do. You walk up on a turkey nest that's in one of those burns, you see it, it's either got a bunch of crushed eggs or it's got a bunch of whole eggs. You don't know the whole story behind what's actually happened there. So, I look back to my master's degree and we were looking specifically at these burns, specifically this time of year. Granted, these are a lot smaller scale than what we're talking about here, on national forest, that maybe thousands of acres. But you'd walk up on a nest and you say, okay, well, that burned, but, well, now I know that this one's had a GPS transmitter on it. I can go back and I can look and see what happened and realize, she abandoned the nest 2 days before this fire ever showed up. Nothing had taken those eggs. You walk in there, it's been burned. The eggs are clearly visible. You assume, if you don't have that information, that nest was burned up. And so that kind of further negates some of those issues.
It's a simple story to say that the fire's
what did it, but you don't know that whole backstory, okay. and so there's more things that go into it.
Why wouldn't they just not burn in April?
The reality, here, national forest land, I mean, you have so many thousands of acres millions of acres that you're attempting to manage for, and they're managing for multiple uses. It's not just turkey populations. I wish, as a turkey biologist, that we could manage every, acre in the state for wild turkeys, but that's, not the reality there. Right. They're burning for fuels mitigation, to reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfires, all of these different things. And you've got to kind of get those burns in when you can.
Have there been catastrophic wildfires in Arkansas?
I'm sure there have been at some point. I know in recent years, you look east of us in Tennessee, you had those big fires that occurred. I think it was around Gatlinburg and in that area.
Yeah.
I mean, so there is the potential in the east, particularly with some of the fuel loads we have. You think about how overstocked a lot of our timber is these days, and the fuel loads that are in there because they haven't burned. I mean, historically, a lot of Arkansas would have been kind of woodland, savanna type habitats, particularly in your uplands, the top of these hills and stuff like that. That fires would have moved through frequently, and it would have reduced some of that naturally. But now we have so much, overstocked timber, a lot of just dead, decaying fuel because we spent years and years and years trying to keep those fires at bay. If we did have a wildfire pop up, you try to knock it out, stomp it out as quick as you could, so it didn't burn a lot of acres. In reality, that probably would have been better if you could have just let it kind of burn.
So that time period is just kind of when they can burn.
Yeah,
it's the best time period for burning. So what you're saying is, if we were managing solely for wild turkeys, we wouldn't burn during that time.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, and I tell managers this all the time. When we look at game and fish owned properties in particular, you've got to look holistically at what you're talking about, what the habitat's telling you. Ideally, we burn in the dormant season, and this is, a little bit arbitrary, but, January into mid-March or something like that, try to finish it up. And then, now we're starting to shift what we consider growing season fires, which could be anywhere from mid to late March, early April, all the way in through, October, November, while those trees are still actively sending nutrients up and down. We can still get a lot of the same benefits of burning, April and May. If the conditions were there, we can get those same benefits burning, August, September, October, if we can get those same weather variables in line so we can run the fire at that point. So generally, we try to avoid that nesting season as an agency, but, if it comes up, if, you've got a stand that's, towards the end of its rotation, it needs to be burned, and we're talking about it's already missed, one window, and you're saying, well, it's turkey season, we can't burn. If you keep doing that, you'd never get anything accomplished because you have so many different seasons throughout the year.
You're pro burn.
I am.
Yeah.
I tell folks all the time, if the conditions allow, and you've got the burn weather, because, not every day is equal when it comes to the weather for burning. You've got to have certain variables all have to line up. So if you hit one of those days, you better take advantage of it, because the idea that if you don't burn that and then, you hit later in the fall, you may not be able to burn it then. And now we're talking a year, 2 years post when you could have burned, and now we're outside of the usable space, for a turkey. Now it's so thick that they don't want to touch it, and it may end up costing you a lot more money to go in there with herbicide or, bringing in something to masticate, mulch that timber to get it back to a point where you could roll a fire through it. And that's going to be a lot more expensive, and it may take years in the budget to be able to afford to do that and have it set aside. So, all of a sudden you went from having something that, you may have lost one nest this year, but now instead of burning it, now you have no nests in it for the next handful of years, where the predation rate on those ones is so much higher that by getting it done, you lose that nest, this year, but hopefully you've benefited all the ones around it.
You're not burning the same block of woods every single year.
Right.
I mean, so that's the other thing to think about. It's like, maybe the south side of that mountain this year gets burned. So, maybe a turkey loses her nest, and maybe she's unsuccessful nesting later, worst case scenario. But they're not going to burn it for another how many years? What's the cycle on some of those?
Depending here, it could be 2 to 3 years down in a lot of, particularly like the Gulf Coastal Plain and maybe in some of the Washita's and the Pine Blue Stem. You get up here in the Ozarks, you're probably talking 3, 4, 5 years. You can spread out a little bit further.
4 years of greatly improved habitat for them to have great potential nesting with no fires at all.
Right.
So, okay.
And since I'm the fall guy for people who are unaware,
I have a fire extinguisher here if you need it.
All right. So, I guess how long does it take for a turkey to settle into a place? Like, is 4 years enough time for a turkey to say, "Oh, I like that. I'm going to That is how. What is?
It's almost immediate. I mean, those birds. I mean, if they typically their home range isn't probably going to get changed all that much if a fire.
They're just going to move out.
they'll move out, but honestly, they move right back in. I mean, a lot of the research that Mike and a lot of other folks have done in the Southeast in recent years, I mean, those birds are moving back in there. I think it's something like 50% of the birds that we've had marked move back into a burned area within 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
And by, the end of a
They're eating,
week,
like,
it's like
smoked
90%.
I'm surprised you didn't know that.
Yeah. Do other states, and I know we can't compare, it's not apples to apples. I'm just curious, mainly because I'd like to figure out the turkey situation because it is the end
Really
of April.
stressful to Misty.
It is. It's the end of April, and we don't have a turkey in the Newcombs.
Misty wakes up all during turkey season and is like, "Are you gonna go kill a turkey today?" And I usually say no, and it really bothers her.
It does.
Is that
bother
why
me.
I'm having to provide your family with rainbow trout?
It's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
It's true.
In lieu of turkeys.
It's true. It's true. Do other states seeing a decline like we are?
For sure.
And are they burning?
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
a lot of those states,
By the end of this, Misty's gonna have it all figured out, and she's gonna tell us like something that Mike Chamberlain and Jeremy never thought of. She's gonna be like, "Well, why don't you just?" We don't even know what that X is.
Yeah.
Didn't you listen to the podcast with Mike Chamberlain? You didn't, did you?
That was 2 podcasts
Caught
ago,
you.
wasn't it?
You weren't on the render.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked all about the southeast decline of turkeys.
Isaac, take that out.
Okay. That's great. Burns. Got it. Yeah. So that's good. Number 2,
Bag limits.
bag limits. Is it just a social issue that we don't just say one turkey?
By social, you mean like political?
I mean, is it
like
because it seems
people
like
will rebel?
yes.
People will revolt.
I think there's a lot of people that look at bag limits like they're the end all be all. Like if we do this, here in Arkansas, we've got a relatively conservative bag limit already. We have, it's a 2 turkey bag limit in the state. You've got other states in the Southeast that have made some changes recently, but a lot of them have had 3, 4, even 5.
Yeah,
turkey
Alabama,
bag
you kill
limits.
5 turkeys.
Yeah,
Wow.
until recently. I think just in
Sorry,
the last,
Misty.
I think just this year they moved from 5 down to 4. But it's still, relatively high number. And, when you start getting up 3, 4, 5 birds in your bag limit, you can have potentially a disproportionate amount of your harvest come from those folks that are harvesting much more than 2. But, here in Arkansas, we've had, 2 bird bag limits for many years, even 3, going back into the 70s, 80s, 90s,
Yep.
early 90s, around there in portions of the state, particularly like along the Mississippi River, some areas in the Washitas. And, the reality is, that was all occurring while populations were rebounding, being actively stocked. So we had a higher bag limit earlier when there were a lot less turkey hunters on the landscape, but when those turkeys were, just basically becoming kind of whole, coming back around. I look at it now, 90% of our harvest in Arkansas comes from folks filling just that first tag.
Okay, that's that's the kind of reasoning I needed to hear.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So it's like not a ton of people are killing 2 turkeys.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, in general, we're talking with the recent years where our harvest has been in the 8,000 kind of range. We're looking at 700, 800 turkeys, out of the entire harvest being somebody's second bird.
Really?
And,
Okay.
there's
That's
been
interesting.
Yeah, there's been times in the past, in the 90s, particularly the Washitas. I looked at this just recently because we do have a proposal out there right now to move to a 1 bird limit. It wasn't something that the turkey program put out there, but it was something that came from some public comment, and the agency decided to put it out for public comment during a recent reg survey. So what I did was I looked back at these 7 or so counties in the Washitas where they went from a 3 bird bag limit to a 2 bird bag limit to a 1 bird bag limit, and then back to a 2 bird bag limit, which we have still through today. And what you see is, populations were declining a bit. Reproduction had been kind of poor in general terms. I mean, you look back now, the reproduction compared to now to back then, it usually, pretty good. But, it was declining. You saw harvest decline. So they instituted a 2 bird bag limit. Population continued to decline, or the harvest continued to decline, but you moved to a 1 bird bag limit, and there really wasn't any difference between those 2 bird limit years and that 1 bird limit year because, again, there's not that many more birds getting shot because somebody's killing a second one, and in most cases, you're probably just seeing other people fill that tag. If you were restricted to 1, you didn't get to go, but you took your son out, you took your wife out.
Yeah, okay, man, that's a great analogy. Now, I can see if you had a 5 bird bag limit and guys really had some, their spots dialed in and had the time and were really good turkey hunters, like you could really hurt something. But with a 2-bird, I see how that the possibilities are less for hurt. And man, I like that. I don't know. I put on that survey that I would be fine with a 1-bird bag limit. Like, I just wouldn't be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Just thinking, we got to sacrifice some for the resource. But I'm one of those guys that, to be honest with you, it's been a long time since I've killed 2 turkeys in Arkansas. And so, maybe to me that's not a big deal. But
yeah, you think about the opportunity that's lost at that point. You go from 2 to 1.
Yep.
Like for me, I was successful this year. When I opening day, I was lucky enough I got a bird.
Those game and fish guys.
Yeah.
They know where to go.
They got them on a string.
I had one tied up there for me so I could get it, make sure I got a bird this year.
Probably had a live hen decoy.
But now, obviously we've kind of limited that harvest in the front end of the season. So when we consider, some of that harvest could be more impactful to that breeding chronology, we tried to limit that, push some of that back a little bit to later in the season when it may be less impactful. So, got that bird. I'm out of the woods for 7 days.
So there's a new regulation, Misty, where if you kill a turkey, you can't kill another one. If you kill one the first week.
Mm-hmm. Anytime within the first 7 days, you can't go until basically the 8th day of the season. So this morning.
If I had killed one on the first day, which I wasn't even in the country, I couldn't have hunted until later in the week because that kind of takes away a little bit of the opportunity for a second bird.
Mm-hmm.
But you could take somebody else hunting. Like if I had some birds dialed in, that second day I could have taken my son or taken Kolby.
Or me or
Josh. Or Misty.
Josh is just sitting over there.
You can't go turkey hunting. You don't have a mustache.
Yeah.
I have a stick on.
Breaks up your outline. Turkeys recognize human faces.
That's right.
If you have a big line across your face,
natural camo, man.
They
Natural
can't.
camo.
It doesn't work. I don't have to put much, extra
right.
covering on the face.
Okay, so that clears it up with me on bag limits.
It's like the whole thing is sort of like all the problems in life right now. We assume the simplest, you want to make it a really simple, it's because of this. But in reality, everything's a lot more complex.
Well, it's a like Chamberlain said, like everybody said, it's death by 1,000 cuts. And like I always go back to can't trust a ground nesting bird because they're going to create problems for you. There's just so many reasons why ground nesting birds have trouble, but also can do really great. But okay, let me ask you this, and this is like, why are our turkeys declining? Like, okay, off the record, I'm gonna turn this off. Okay, wink, wink. Why? What is happening? We already know everything that like everybody said. It's just like death by 1,000 cuts. Can be bag limits. It can be predation. It's the forest regime. I don't know why is.
But what's the real reason?
Yeah, what are you hiding from us, Jeremy?
I wish it was as easy as just pulling something out of the bag of tricks and saying, yeah, this is it. That smoking gun, that silver bullet that would fix everything. I think there's a lot of stuff that's going into what's gone on here in the state in Arkansas. Coming in from that outside perspective, not being from here, I'm thankful that I didn't experience turkey populations in the early 2000s. I was alive, but I wasn't hunting turkeys at that point. I wasn't hunting turkeys in the South in particular. So, I started hunting turkeys in my mid-20s, 23, 24, somewhere in that ballpark. And I've never had a bad turkey hunt. And I've never had a bad turkey season since I started hunting. I hunt mostly public land, but I never had that experience. I hear from most folks that I used to go out to this spot and I'd hear 12 birds gobbling on the ridge. I've never had that. I've had some spots where I've heard 3, 4, 5, something like that, but that's still all in these recent years. And, I kill some, I don't kill some in other chances, but I've heard birds gobbling. It's a great experience. But, some of it you're dealing with that expectation that, you've got folks that started turkey hunting right there when things were perfect. Those populations were at their highest point, but it may not have been, sustainable. That may not have been the reality. In particular, what I look at here in the state is, thinking about the number of turkey hunters that were on the landscape. You think about, if you were around, you were hunting in the 80s, maybe even the early 90s, a lot of folks that I talked to, they could count on one hand the number of other turkey hunters they even knew, they were hunting in the area that they hunted. And, you get into the late 90s, you were talking with Will in the previous podcast and thinking about the truth and, all of that kind of blowing up and people just eating all that information
kind of an
up.
explosion of turkey hunting knowledge and people wanting to become turkey hunters.
Yeah, it's kind of like what they talk about in the waterfowl world, like this Duck Dynasty bump, in hunter numbers. And I think we saw that at that time when things were peaking. And then, when you look back in time, I think Mike brought this up where, it was kind of right there under our fingers, but we didn't really recognize what was happening at the time because a couple bad years in a row wasn't that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things at that time. But now, 20 years later, we can look back and see how long that actually, continued to occur and reproduction kept declining. And, here in the state, you saw the agency look at how good populations were doing, look at the interest. They started adding more days to the season. So you went from, the mid 80s through the early 2000s, you were looking, I think we had about 23, 24 day long season, about what we're at now with the youth hunt. And all of a sudden you started going up into 30, 35 days, 39 days by 2003, 2004. And that's an incredible amount of pressure to put on that population in a short period of time. So there's a lot of birds, but there's a lot more turkey hunters coming into the fold at that time. So people were really being successful. But I think what we did was we overshot, at that period of time. It's not likely that, I think we look out there and we say, okay, harvest is estimated at roughly 10% of your population. And so you extrapolate out from that number what you anticipate your population was. And we would have said, okay, we were nearly 200,000 turkeys back around that time. But if we were over harvesting them at that period of time, it's unlikely that we were ever truly that high of a population. We had a better population than we do now, but it's hard to go back and look at that and then compare it to now and say, okay, did we drop 60 to 65%, like a lot of people say when you're just looking at those harvest numbers, because, you're looking at the harvest number and that's one static number, but you're not looking at all the things that go into that. So you're not looking at those season length fluctuations. You're not looking at bag limits like, Arkansas and Mississippi are the only two states out there that restrict jake harvest. Prior to 2000, nearly 40% of our harvest was made up of jakes here in the state.
Wow.
It's incredible numbers. And then you get from 2000 to 2010, we restricted that to one jake for every hunter. That dropped that percentage from 40 down to about 25%. And then in 2011, we instituted the no jake rule, so only youth hunters had that exception. They could kill one jake. That's dropped that number even further. Now we're down to 4% of our harvest each year is made up of jakes.
So it's been that way for 10 years.
It has now.
So the no jake policy has been successful in at least protecting jakes.
In at least protecting jakes. Well, the unfortunate reality is we don't know early on what those survival rates look like. We recently finished up some research here in the last few years that looked at the impact of that regulation. We're looking at survival of adult and juvenile males, and we were seeing about 90% survival of those jakes. Very few, if any, were actually even shot during the season. Most of them were just dying of natural mortality, which isn't much. They have pretty good survival, in the absence of hunting pressure.
Right.
Once they get about 4 weeks old or so. I mean, you get past that first month and, they're fairly golden. But what we're seeing now is that, our 2-year-olds and stuff, we're hammering them about 30% survival once they hit year 2.
So now that we took the pressure off the jakes, it's all going to the 2-year-olds.
The 2-year-olds, and then you start getting the 3, 4-plus-year-old birds, and you jump back up about 50%. And you think about it, those birds they've been through the game a time or two. At that point, they're the smarter ones out there. They they don't just come running into your calling like a 2-year-old would do. They're hard gobbling. The hunts that you get really, really excited about, and because they just come in, they act the way most people think the birds should.
Right.
But what we don't know is back prior, back when we could kill 2 of those birds, what those survival rates look like. Did we, instead of 90% survival of a jake, did we see 60, 70% survival of jake? But what about those 2-year-olds? Did that then increase that 2-year-old survival? Because somebody shot a jake and they couldn't kill another one today. So the longbeard that may have been in there with them, survived another day or maybe the season. And so maybe their survival actually went up a little bit. And, is that biologically significant to see those fluctuations? But we don't know what those numbers were like. So it's hard to say. It's, in the one hand, that regulation has worked. It's generated the idea that we're seeing more of those jakes survive that first year. But we don't know, how it truly compares to what our earlier regulations were like, and whether or not that's a problem or not.
So, do you think that are we ever going to get our turkeys back? I mean, like, so if this is part of a cycle, and also part of it is just there's not as many places for turkeys to be, but that doesn't fully make sense for like if you just took national forest, like we have the same amount of national forest, and there's some interior sections of national forest that probably aren't really affected by the encroachment of civilization. I'm kind of thinking about this idea that habitat is being lost, but in a lot of places habitat necessarily wouldn't be lost.
It's not being lost, outright. Like there's still forested landscape, but the condition of that forested landscape is different than potentially it has been in years past. And it's not as desirable from a turkey standpoint. We were talking about overstock timber. I mean, just driving up, I was driving the pig trail, on my way up here, and you're driving through the national forest through there, and there's some spots here or there that look a little more woodland type condition. You can see a little bit of understory, but most of the area you're driving through there, whether it's pine, hardwood, you're looking at a lot of leaf litter, a lot of pine straw, very little understory vegetation. So, a turkey can still nest in there, but it's not quality nesting habitat. It's still going to be a little more vulnerable to predators. It's easier for them to see her potentially, but then on top of that, there's not really good brooder in habitat. There's not that low growing, lush green vegetation that's just low enough off the ground that it can hide a poult. The hen can see over it, and there's lots of insects. There's not a lot of that out there, and you see that across a lot of the
and
forest.
we had that 20 years ago.
I'm guessing, that's me not being here in the state, but I think 20, 30, 40 years ago, you saw different management, in some of those areas. I look nowadays at how a lot of agencies operate, and we've seen a lot of reductions in field staff and things like that, where, even particular here, you look at a lot of our national forest lands, we've got a lot of conglomerates of ranger districts, in areas that used to have 3 separate ranger districts with 3 separate staff that all had, responsibilities for a much smaller acreage. Now you've got all of those in one single district with about a third of the staff that they once had, but now they're responsible for 3 times the acreage that they used to be. And, I think that all starts putting challenges on things.
That's part of it that I just don't understand is like, how is the habitat so much different now than it was at the peak, of turkey populations? I think you answered it, is that there's just 1,000 different things. I mean, the forests are 20 years older.
Mm-hmm.
There is differences in management of stuff.
And it may not be that significant from that time period, but you think we were kind of leading up to it. So a lot of the stuff that produced the birds that were on the landscape 20 years ago would have been just a few more years before that. So, over time,
you might be talking about a 40 or 50 year time span, because, maybe what happened 40 years ago produced the birds that we had 20 years ago, but then that faded away. Misty, have you figured this out yet?
Well, I do have a question. I know I'm a little bit more familiar with bear and how that's studied by the Game and Fish, and they go in and they can tell you how many babies they're having. Is there any way that you can figure out if turkeys are laying more eggs or less eggs?
So, not specifically the number of eggs. We occasionally we do research projects, and they have over time, back in the 90s and in the early to mid, 2010s, we had some other research going on where they actually went out, caught birds, put transmitters on them, followed them around, and they track the nesting effort. And so they go to nest whether they're successful or not. They can count the eggs, get all that information. To my knowledge, the number of eggs, things like that hasn't changed. I'm sure the hatch rate hasn't really changed all that much. I think we're still seeing of the ones that are successful, the number of eggs that hatch is usually relatively high. But what we do, on a regular basis, and it's been going on since the early 80s, is we do a population survey, or a lot of folks call it a brood survey. So that's historically from the 80s until just a few years ago when I came on board. That was completed by agency personnel, law enforcement officers within the agency, U.S. Forest Service personnel, other, agency partners, Fish and Wildlife Service, folks like that. And what they do is during the summer months, June through August, they'd record all of the turkeys that they saw. It didn't matter if it was just a group of gobblers, it was a hen with a group of poults, a few hens all together alone. And what we do is we compile all that information and we calculate out what's known as a poult per hen ratio. And so we look at the number of poults that are observed versus the number of adult females that are observed, and we get that ratio, and you're able to look at the reproductive rate.
So basically, it's just people's observations. So turkeys are pretty hard to gauge in terms of study like that. You probably would have known that if you listened to Mike Chamberlain.
Isaac,
we talked extensively about this.
Cut that out, Isaac.
No, it's can you imagine if the Game and Fish did a turkey poult trip like they do with the bears? You remember the pictures of everybody holding those little bears?
Yeah.
What if we did? We were with
Little
Jeremy.
chicks.
See Jeremy smiling, just this big cheeky grin, holding a little turkey egg, little photos. That's probably what y'all should do.
Yeah.
I think it would help.
I don't know about that. I get real worried when you start bumping hens off in nests and doing stuff like that. They tend not to come
Tranquilize
back.
them, man, just like the bears. Sneak up on it, tranquilize the hen. You hold the hen up by the leg,
nets,
and
baby.
hold her
The
egg.
rocket nets. Maybe we should bring the rocket nets back.
Rocket nets. Yeah, okay. So is this just like, are we just always going to have turkey numbers like we do right now? Or do you think we're at a low point and we're probably going to bounce back up just a little bit and kind of equalize
There's one
out?
right
Like,
answer here.
what's your
I think we have been at a low point. I mean, you look back through time, just prior to my getting here, 2015 to 2019 were the 4 of the 5 lowest reproductive years on record.
he said right
We
before he
didn't
got
start
here.
the fire.
I see we didn't start. Jeremy, we're
Who was the previous biologist
Yeah,
that
man.
he just threw under the bus?
But I mean, a lot of this is, just obviously, something that's out of our control. A lot of times weather and things like that are impacting those a
Right.
lot more than everything else. I mean, obviously habitat, all those influence too, but the overarching weather patterns have been pretty poor that period of time.
Springs have just
Above
been
average,
wildly
wet, cold. So, I mean, poults, in that first couple weeks of life, they can't thermoregulate. So if they're getting their cold, they're getting wet, they're dying of hypothermia, things like that, and you're losing a ton of birds really, really quick. Whereas when you get to some drier spring weather like we've actually had the last couple of years, I was a little worried in the last couple that, it was too wet at the wrong time, but it must have hit just right within a lot of our hatching because we've had a decent hatch in 2020 and 2021. Okay. And so what I look at is that our populations are probably coming up a little bit. We've kind of hit that low point. 2020 didn't help things because, everybody was off work. So we kind of hammered them in that year. We had a higher harvest, but that was probably inflated. We probably should have been going down that year, but we spiked up. So then last year we ended up dropping, pretty good amount with our harvest because we probably overshot what kind of surplus we had from the year before, which wouldn't have been a whole heck of a lot of birds. Whereas now, we went from those 4 to 5 poor years, had a good year. They suggest in a good year reproduction, you can about double your population. You think about two poults per hen. She's replacing herself and another bird.
You could be just a couple of years away from numbers being pretty high.
Yeah, it really doesn't take much. I mean, a lot of the old literature talks about populations, fluctuating upwards of 50%, above and below the long-term, kind of average because you have those years where
I've never
you miss
thought about
hatch.
that. When you have an animal that has the potential to have like 7 or 8, maybe say, a real successful hen might raise a whole clutch of poults, and you've just like doubled your population immediately. I like the hope inside of that. I think I'm going to be a turkey biologist now. See, like bear populations, man, you want to spike up a bear populations, get ready to sit there and twiddle your thumbs for about 20 years because a bear doesn't reach sexual maturity till it's about 4 years old, only has cubs every other year. Jeremy's in the right business.
Yeah.
Because you could double your population
Right
immediately.
place, right time, Jeremy.
Yep, right place, right time, Jeremy. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean,
And we're counting on you to double our turkey population. It's all on you, man.
I'm wanting the 5 bird bag limit.
Isn't that funny how it's like Jeremy's here, he's in charge of it, and we're like, it's all you, man.
Make turkey hunting great again, man.
When did
Do you feel the pressure? I mean, like, really, is there social pressure on you about turkeys?
Oh,
like we're giving you a hard time here. We realize you're just doing your job.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. I mean, I get constant contacts from folks all the time about, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? We need to do what this state's doing, that state's doing. And, I take a lot of this stuff personally, and especially when I start hearing stuff, about me or what we're doing, all we're thinking about is the dollar
is it hard
bills.
not to take it personal?
It's hard not to. I mean, I'm passionate about turkeys.
Yeah.
Me and my wife just had a little boy back in the fall, and, I'm thinking about, him 6-7 years down the road when he's able to hunt. I'm trying to manage for him and everybody else's kids that are out there, thinking about the future and not necessarily thinking about, today and just tomorrow, what we're hunting. We've got to think about what do we need to do now that we can set, the future up for success. And, that may take some reduction in what we're able to do now for that long-term benefit. And so I'm been pretty happy and pretty excited that our agency has been willing to, take that kind of leap of faith at this point in time and move in that direction and kind of try to put the resource first and foremost, still trying to maintain, some quality opportunity there for folks. So you still have that to, go out and experience and participate in turkey hunting, but that hopefully that sets us up for success, here down the line to where we get to a point where we can maintain some sort of, kind of stable regulations. I don't think we want to get to a point where we're chasing populations. Like things are great, now let's keep just like dialing up the pressure now. We're going to add bag limits. We're going to add time. Like I think what you need to do is maintain those consistent regulations, be a little bit conservative to make up for those potential poor years that you have down the road. And it balances out, you'll have some good years, you'll have some bad years, but that way you don't have some really, really, really bad years and you're trying to pull yourself up out of a hole.
So what would you say the major, like, one or two things that you guys are doing right now that is going to help us get a handle on it?
So from the regulatory standpoint, obviously, that's one of the major things that we can control. So, pushing the season back to where we did right in and around April 19th, and that's going to vary based on calendar creep because we put it as the third Monday in April. Okay. To limit some of that early pressure because, you set it up on Saturday, everybody can go. Yeah. You end up having a lot more issues, safety issues, hunter interference issues, it's greater conflict. So we keep it on a Monday to try to spread some of that pressure out throughout the week so it's not all just a free-for-all on the opening day because then a lot of folks just aren't happy with that. And we've had a lot of, complaints over the years when they did that and moving it back to Monday. But by pushing us back to that kind of April 19th time frame, we're allowing more of those hens to be bred. Most of the information I had to work with some of our research projects with those population surveys, we could actually, we take age estimates on the poult so we can backdate how old we anticipate those. And I usually go pretty conservative. If somebody says they're 2 weeks old, okay, I'm saying they're 14 days. At that point, I go back from that 14 days. That's when they hatched. I can go back 26, 28 days. I usually go 28, just go on the far side of things when they're hatching to say, okay, this is when they first started incubating that nest, and then go back even further to when they started laying that about 14 days before that. So that's what we're talking about in that April 19th time frame is that's the peak nest initiation or egg laying time period in the state. So there's a bunch of birds.
So most of the breeding's being done in March?
Some of the breeding's being done in March. Most of it's probably ramping up right there in the middle of April. Typically some of the old research, and this is looking at captive birds, but basically suggests that, those birds are getting bred and going to lay that start that laying process probably within 48 to 72 hours of when they were bred. So, and it's not to say that some of those hens aren't getting bred early. I mean, I get reports every year, here's trail camera picture and there's a bird, breeding a hen 1st of March, 7th of March, something like that. Well, that's all occurring, and some of those birds aren't ready to actually lay that nest, so they continue to breed with more toms right up until the time that they're ready to start that process. And most of that occurs right around now, this previous week or so. And so, where we had seasons timed about the 10th or so of April, that fell right within probably that peak breeding period in the state. So that's when most of those toms didn't have to gobble as much. They're sitting up there on the limb. They might gobble a few times, but a lot of those hens are right there roosted around them because they're going to come down. They're going to breed with them early, and then they're going to move off and potentially start that laying sequence pretty shortly thereafter. And so that obviously reduces, a lot of the satisfaction with hunting. Gobbling's going down. You're not hearing as much. This week, this first week here of the season wasn't the best, but some of that's been influenced probably more by weather. Spring green up this year was actually probably a little bit delayed from
Yeah,
what it has
for
been.
sure.
So, we may actually be hitting more of that kind of lull period right now, and some of that may really start to ramp up here in the latter, 2/3 of the season over the next few days.
What if you had a message for people about turkey hunting, what would you say? Like, just in terms of you being a part of the agency, like, what would you ask of people?
I would ask folks to have some patience. I mean, obviously, we didn't get to the point that we're at right now overnight, and we're not going to change that overnight.
Wait a minute, I thought you were going to double the turkey population. Didn't you say that? Didn't he say that?
In 2 weeks.
That's
I
what
thought
I
he said in
understood.
1 year he could double the turkey population.
I wish it worked that way. I wish it was that easy. But my
I'm gonna
hope
quote
is,
you
yeah.
saying that.
My hope is that over time here that we can hit some of those good springs. Like we've had 2 pretty good hatches. If we get another really good hatch this year, I mean, you think about it, you might have doubled your population 2 years ago, but you were at a real low point. So then last year, if we about doubled it again, now we're even better and we're really starting to see it. Well, now if we get a 3rd year back to back to back, now we really see it, in these future years, because you're going to have a lot more young birds running around, and then maybe potentially your gobbling activity is going to increase. But the likelihood is we'll have a poor year. There's no guarantee that we're going to get that back to back to back, because we just don't know what that weather's going to do. So I would just say to have patience, take some time, maybe kind of recalibrate those expectations. Don't look back to the early 2000s and say, okay, we killed 20,000 birds. We need
Misty.
to kill 20,000 again, because it's unlikely that we're ever going to see our harvest numbers get that high again because of the new regulations that we have in place. Everything that's changed from back then to now, it's not going to allow those numbers to quite get to that point. I look back to when we had a later season just a handful of years ago, 2012 to 16 time period. We killed about 10 to 11,000 or so birds in the state. We were one of the states at that time we actually saw we had declined a whole bunch, and then we started coming up. We actually made this increase during those years, which is kind of out of the norm for a lot of the other states. Most people were either just kind of staying steady or still declining. And we saw this nice spike. We don't know if that was the regulations. We know we had good reproduction on the front end of that, 2012 and 13, but we didn't kind of follow through for it the remaining years. So we don't know, would we have just continued to go down? Would we have leveled out? Anything about that, which is unfortunate. And the hope will be that, we can keep the regulations we have in place now for some time to watch those trends and actually get trend data. Because, going back the last 30, 40 years, we've made so many regulation changes as an agency, and it's actually, a lot of folks look at, what has the agency done? And they've actually done a lot compared to a lot of other agencies. We've made so many regs changes, but it makes it impossible to, determine any sort of trend data because of all those different kind of interwoven regs changes that, each one has its own different impact on what that harvest is going to be. So it makes trying to compare from one year to the next, almost impossible. So hopefully we can kind of maintain some and see it out. And then if we do need to make a change, we make one change at a time and say, okay, how is this impacted? And maybe study that and see, okay, we went to this, we didn't see any change. Okay, maybe we can return that and we move one of these other factors. Yeah. And hopefully in time we'll get to a point where we can actually say, how many turkey hunters do we have in the state? I don't know how many we have. And, some of our estimates.
I was going to ask, we don't have any idea how many?
We don't. We have some estimates based on some kind of deer and turkey hunter opinion surveys that were done in 14, 16, and 18 that say, okay, maybe about 40% of our license holders hunt turkeys. Well, depending on which number you use and the exact, license holders, that could be anywhere from 70 to 100 and something thousand turkey hunters in the state. So, when I look at a year where we have, say we have 70,000, last year we killed 7,000 turkeys. Well, okay, that says, okay, maybe you got about 10% success. But, when I look at some of my counterparts, talk to like Georgia, they estimate they've got 50 to 60,000 turkey hunters. They're a much larger state than us. They've got more birds than us. I'd be kind of hard-pressed to expect we have more turkey hunters here in Arkansas than there. Yeah. So, say we have half as much. Say we have 35, 40,000 turkey hunters. Well, now all of a sudden your success rate's 20%, and that's actually maybe more in line with a lot of these other states throughout the country. Maybe that's more normal, and we're kind of in the ballpark of where we should be, and, you're just going to see those fluctuations depending on what that hatch looks like. And it's going to be every other year because we don't harvest jakes. So you don't see those trends, wherever you see a spike in reproduction, you don't see that spike in harvest, come for 2 years instead of in a lot of states where, since you're able to harvest jakes, it happens that following year. So like if this summer, you had a good year in a lot of states, you'd see that spike in harvest next spring. Whereas here we'd see it 2 years later.
Yeah. Well,
Fascinating stuff.
yeah, that's great. Well, man, thanks a ton for coming up here.
Yeah,
Really appreciate it. And we'll give you a couple more years, Jeremy. We'll be patient with you. But by about 2 years from now, I need like 5 bird bag limit. No, man.
And if you
I'm
need
all-
anything, let us know. We'll get Austin to get it for you.
That's right.
Oh, Isaac, cut that.
That's right. That's right. No, leave it in there. No, man, we appreciate what you're doing for real. We know it's not an easy chair to sit in, and golly, man, it's a dynamic and complex system that's constantly changing. I mean, with the landscape and the human involvement and weather changing, weather patterns are undoubtedly changing. It's like such a complex system. I mean, all we can do is give it our best. And I know, I have full faith. I have a lot of faith in game agencies just doing the absolute best they can. It's in their best interest. I mean, every state agency wants engagement from people. They know to get that engagement, they've got to have wildlife. I mean, we're all kind of on the same team in terms of these things. And these are the guys that have the data, have the research, are doing the best that we know how inside of the bounds of science and human relations to make all this stuff work. So,
Yep. We
It's great.
appreciate the hard work and the, considering the habitat, the wildlife, and the hunters. And I think you guys do a great job balancing that out.
yeah, right on.
This show is sponsored in part by BetterHelp. Around New Year's, we get obsessed with how to change ourselves instead of just expanding on what we've already done right. Maybe you finally organized one part of your space and you want to tackle another. Or maybe you're taking your supplements every morning and now you actually want to eat breakfast. In the last year, I've been more diligent about going to the gym on a regimented schedule, and it's made a lot of difference in my life. Therapy helps you find your strengths so that you can ditch the extreme resolutions and make changes that really stick. Therapy is helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit BetterHelp.com/Grease today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/Grease.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.